Hey, what is happening, everybody out there? This is Jakejames Lugo. Welcome to the channel and welcome to a brand new episode of Definitive Discussion Rebooted. Again, where I bring a whole bunch of different guests from all over the place throughout the games industry, the internet, and a whole bunch of other cool places. And we talk about a variety of great topics here on the show. If you haven't checked out any of the previous episodes, I highly recommend that you do so. I had my boy Dino on here not too long ago. I had a whole bunch of other guests. It was pretty insane, pretty crazy. There's a lot of great content. But tonight, I got a cool guest with me. That's someone I'm actually a fan of. I follow his content a lot here on YouTube. Tipster, fellow content creator, YouTuber, Twitch streamer, does a lot of great stuff, doing a whole bunch of videos on YouTube. But Tipster, welcome. Thanks for chatting it up with me. How you doing, my dude?
Pretty good, man. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Of course, yes. So the reason why I wanted to have you on is because you do a lot of videos covering a variety of different news and trendy topics on YouTube, on gaming, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I figured, you know what, it'd be fun to bounce off with you a little bit and kind of dive into this topic a little bit. Does it ever get tiring, you know, as far as chasing, like, what's the next latest, biggest, you know, important topic that people want to hear about, getting an opinion or a hot take on something that's brand new, that's just breaking and stuff? I mean, I can imagine it gets a little bit annoying trying to, you know, contribute something new to something that everybody's talking about, right?
Honestly, I'm having the most fun I've ever had with my content. It was actually earlier this year that I kind of shifted to the kind of content I'm doing now, which is kind of the gaming and trending news stuff. Some people would call it drama content. I've been compared.
There's a lot of drama out here.
Yeah, I've been compared to the gaming version of Drama Alert, which I know people are trying to insult.
I don't know if it's that crazy. I don't think you're that crazy. Yeah, you're not going the beard or nothing. You're not going to that point.
But it's funny because a lot of people use that as an insult. But honestly, I look at Keemstar and I'm like, that dude's like super successful. So I take it as a compliment, honestly, if people are going to try and compare me to him. But I'm having a blast creating this kind of content, just kind of giving, you know, having the opportunity to kind of dig into a topic and kind of give my own take on it. It's tons of fun and I'm really enjoying it, man.
Yeah, so, but why specifically like latest trendy topics? Because I know obviously there's a lot of different YouTube channels out there, a lot of different creators that are doing a bunch of different stuff related to gaming or pop culture or anything of the sort. But really trending news or breaking news seems to be a thing that a lot of people tend to gravitate towards because obviously that's the biggest like stuff that people are talking about in the moment. But with that being said, again, there's so many people talking about the same thing that happens on the minute and stuff. Why specifically that? Why does that resonate with you?
I can say that, honestly, a lot of people kind of like to try and pretend like they don't like drama. Like, oh, everybody complains about drama. But let's be honest, everybody loves it. There's a reason why reality TV is so popular, shows like TMZ, shows like Drama Alert, stuff like that, because people like to see a shit show.
That's facts. Straight up.
It's a lot of fun to cover it. And I could say from a viewer's perspective, kind of looking at all these channels that cover this stuff or all these people who cover this stuff and kind of seeing everybody's different take. It's nice to hear what other people have to say about something. So yeah, maybe they're covering similar topics, but everybody has their own version of what they think about it. And it's really interesting to look at a trending topic and see what different people have to say about it and their stance on it. I find that really interesting.
Now, does it ever get to the point where it gets oversaturated? Like, obviously, again, I follow your content. I follow a lot of other people's content that do similar stuff. Again, talking about gaming news, breaking news, hot takes, podcast discussions, etc. Does it ever get oversaturated with the opinions, though? Because I find sometimes I'll run into a bunch of different creators, and even though they're all giving their own opinions, they're all essentially saying the same thing. Or at least, you know, it's very hard to kind of like contribute something unique and like a different type of perspective on something that already like 100, 200, 300 plus people are already talking about. That I can imagine, and even from my own experience, I've seen could get very difficult and stuff. How do you deal with it, though?
You know, a lot of times there are those certain topics where everybody's kind of on the same page with it. You have a certain issue where, like, there's no denying that this was really bad or this was a really good situation, whatever the case may be. So there's definitely those times where, like, you listen to everybody and they all kind of parrot the same thing. It definitely happens sometimes, and it can be a little bit frustrating, especially from the perspective of a content creator where you watch somebody else's take on something before you upload your video and you're just kind of like, damn, they literally said exactly what I was going to say.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, you do have your own audience and they want to know what your take is, and maybe your take is the same take as somebody else, but they want to hear it from you and they want to know what you have to say. So even in a situation like that, where I see a lot of people who are saying the same thing that I'm about to say, I know my audience wants to hear what I have to say, so I share it with them anyway.
True. And you know what I find with that also? There's a lot of diffusion between audiences. There's a lot of merging between audiences because people, obviously, they're not just going to be a fan of just one creator, one person. They're going to be a fan of multiple. And they're kind of like me where I'll watch and listen to a lot of different creators on the same subject, like probably 6, maybe 7 or 10 different people, but they all have their own little stuff or whatnot. Does it ever get more interesting where you find yourself, you know, blending or coming up with like similar opinions as somebody else, even though you guys are coming from 2 different perspectives?
Yeah, that definitely happens pretty often. It's not uncommon for someone who has a different background or something like that to have a similar take as yours and to kind of see a lot of people kind of relate to you in a way that I guess that based on your life experiences, you kind of feel the same way about it. It happens constantly, sure. Absolutely. Whenever you have a lot of people covering the same sort of things, there's going to be that crossover for sure.
Definitely. And I think the most recent example, obviously, I've watched your video about, and I saw a couple others. Obviously, the Blizzard situation with Diablo Immortal. That's like obviously a big thing right now. And I usually see, I mean, there's those moments where I feel like everybody's in the general agreement or general consensus, especially on some of the bigger topics that are like really important and stuff. But I think also sometimes, I think it could be a little bit annoying where, you know, there's a lot of noise and a lot of like different types of opinions that just happen from all over the place, even though everybody's essentially saying the same thing, but they'll sometimes try to be those outliers that try to be different, not necessarily where they're saying anything that's like, you know, too different, but like they want to get a reaction from people and stuff. Do you find a lot of that usually within the medium, you know, with people just, again, within the same type of like vicinity or of like, or same type of niche as in YouTube, like covering trending topics and stuff, but people want to get that pop, people want to get those eyes on them?
Oh yeah, there's definitely times when somebody will cover a topic just because it's like the hot thing to talk about right now. You gave a good example with the Diablo thing, and you have people who are really genuine, like myself, who do give kind of an original idea in that, yeah, I understand why people are upset, but at the same time, I'm kind of interested in checking out the game when it comes out and seeing if it's actually as bad as people think it's going to be. But you have a lot of people who are covering it just because it's the new hot sauce that everybody wants to talk about. And you can usually really point those people out who are just covering it because it's the hot thing to talk about, because they literally word for word copy what they're saying. It's not full on plagiarism. I wouldn't say that much.
It's not like a Philip Mewson.
No, it's definitely not a Philip Mewson situation, which I covered that one as well. That one was a really interesting story, but you can see enough that they had just basically went over and watched other people's videos and like, oh, okay, I'll pick that point out of this video and I'll comment on that the same way, and I'll pick this point out and I'll kind of mix it up in a way to try to make it seem like an original thought. But the audience knows. They can spot that stuff really quickly.
Yeah, and I think that that's another good point I think we should touch on is, you know, this idea of being genuine, this idea of being authentic and being quote unquote real. I mean, how do you tread the line with that? Because in my own personal experience, obviously, you know, you obviously have to take all the different facts and points of whatever that you're talking about into account and stuff. And there's always that fear about, you know, upsetting people with your opinion and stuff. And eventually you get over that and stuff. But I think there's also another fear that comes along with it, that people are just going to not take your stuff at face value or not going to believe you just by default because either they've been burnt by other creators or other avenues and stuff. That always seems like it's a harsh struggle. I mean, do you ever find yourself dealing with that a little bit, or like really trying to struggle to show people that you're genuine, but like sometimes it just doesn't work out?
Yeah, there's always going to be those people that they automatically assume that everything you say, there's some kind of agenda.
It's the internet.
Or you're just, yeah, exactly. So there's always going to be people that are cynical. That's just a thing on the internet. What I've always tried to do with my content is whenever I'm investigating something or I'm looking into something I want to cover, I look at all the facts that we have available to us. I look at them all. I present them as we know them to the audience. Once I've presented all the facts to the audience, I give a brief little snippet on here's what my opinion is on this subject. And then once I've shared my opinion, I open it up for people to share their own opinions in the comments. And that's kind of the approach I've taken to try and be genuine with the audience, so they can kind of see, here's the fact, here's what I think about it. Now, what do you guys think about it? I found that works really well for me. For the most part, people can see that I'm really genuine. Very rarely do I get someone who's like, oh, he's just saying that because that's the popular thing to say. But it's the internet. It happens from time to time, and I try not to worry about it.
With that being said, then, do you find that a lot more people, though, tend to kind of chase those hot takes as opposed to just giving a perspective? Like, for example, again, we'll use the Diablo Immortal example or news as an example right now. I mean, there was a lot of different opinions, a lot of different feelings about that, especially for the people coming out of BlizzCon and stuff. But what I saw on social media and even in a couple YouTube videos and podcasts and stuff, that there was those hot takes of people just trying to get a quippy, thought or quippy perspective out there to get that reaction or that rise towards them and stuff, as opposed to other people maybe have covered it later on within the days that followed that were just giving whatever perspective or whatever opinions that they had about the news. I mean, which one really does like the die cast more in favor of? I mean, I see a lot more people doing the hot takes than I do the genuine opinions.
Yeah, a lot of times I see that people will typically look at a topic like this, look at a story like this, and they'll kind of look at social media to say, what is the people that are upset about this saying? Like in the case of the Diablo thing, are people upset about this? Are people excited about this? What exactly is kind of the baseline for the majority of people, how they feel? And then they just kind of side with that side because they don't want to upset people or they don't want to make people angry. So they go with, okay, most people seem like they're really upset in this case, so that's what I'm going to go with. But again, if you're going to do that, are you going to get a lot of clicks on your video or your blog or whatever it is you do? Yeah, sure, you probably will, but the audience can very quickly spot it when you're just kind of going in step with whatever the trend is or whatever the majority of people say that you should feel about a particular topic. So yeah, they'll get the clicks and they'll get that little clickbait, to kind of capitalize on a trending topic. But people will spot it out very quickly. It never fails. They always spot it out when somebody's not being real with the topic. I think a good example of that right now is what we're seeing with Pat the NES Punk's take.
I saw that. I just watched that. I just watched your video on it like right before we started recording.
Yeah, and I love Pat. I mean, we've had our run-ins in the past, and it is what it is. It's water under the bridge as far as I'm concerned. But honestly, that dude, he has a history of not taking criticism very well and also going into stories blind. And that's not a good thing to do, because then you end up with situations like this where a lot of people are upset because you clearly didn't do your due diligence to get to the bottom of the story.
I think there's one other thing we should acknowledge about that. To play a little devil's advocate here, I think sometimes, depending on the story, it's good to go in blind because you could get that fresh, filtered perspective or untainted perspective on something. But I think if you're going to be reporting, like if you're not doing because to me, when I look at Pat the NES Punk's, what is it? I think it's like the something pod. I forgot what the name of it is.
The CU podcast, completely
the CU
unnecessary.
Podcast, yeah, completely unnecessary podcast. Yeah, to completely miss the name, but. That podcast to me, that's just like a discussion. That's not him reporting on the news, I feel like. Even when he breaks it up into certain, different, segments, of the podcast. Because it's like 1-2 hour show or something. He breaks up to 10-minute segments or something like that. But for me, it's him having a discussion with his co-hosts about that type of stuff. As opposed to you and what I've seen from Keemstar and from other people as well. Even Spawnwave Media, you guys are reporting on the news. Giving that information to the people and then giving your opinion about it afterwards after you give the facts and stuff. So I think there's a little bit of checks and balances there with that type of approach. I agree with you, though, that you shouldn't be always going into that with that type of mindset, because again, you're not doing due diligence to the audience as far as informing them. You're just putting out an opinion out there.
Yeah, especially since the bulk of his audience does come to him for news. I can think of a ton of topics that he was the one who broke the news on them. Like a good example would be when he was covering GameStop getting into the retro gaming market and a lot of the shady things that were happening in the background. He was the one that broke those stories. So because of stories like that, where he breaks them, people do go to him for news. And maybe it is supposed to be just a general discussion between him and Ian, but a lot of people look to him as a news source, whether that's intentional or not. So you do still have to do your due diligence to make sure you get the facts straight, because people are looking to you for the latest news in gaming.
So here's a good thing that I just thought of now based off of that. Is it really his responsibility, not just Pat, but anybody that finds himself in that type of position? Is it really their responsibility to all of a sudden now go from being a discussion podcast to do reporting the news, kind of like what you do or what anybody else does that are in a similar position? I mean, in his case, maybe it's just him. He just wants to keep it like that, just as a discussion with him and his friend talking about whatever the topic is at the time. I mean, is it really his fault that maybe he doesn't want to do stuff like that, but the audience still still takes it where he's kind of like a news source to them. I mean, at that point, it really becomes a question of like, okay, whose responsibility and whose like ethics really are called into question there.
I think it's kind of a delicate balance. And the reason I say that is because, yes, the audience is coming to him for news, but at the same time, maybe he's just looking to have this little roundtable conversation between him and Ian. Right. And you're free to create whatever content you want to create and have whatever vision you want for your content. However, if you're going to be commenting on stuff that is news, because at the end of the day, even if it is just this is news that's happening in the games industry, you have to at least have some level of knowledge of what's going on with the topics that you're covering. And we have situations in this particular subject where Pat made the comment that, isn't this just a mobile version of Diablo? And it's like, no, it's not that. Had you done a little bit of research, you would know that this is actually a new Diablo game, and the fans wanted a new Diablo game, but they didn't want one that's exclusive to mobile. And he was like, well, why are people so upset about this? You know, they made this announcement, like, what's the big deal? Well, if you did a little bit of digging, you would know that there was a lot of rumors leading up to BlizzCon that said that we would potentially see a new Diablo game. So people were pumped for this thing. So it's one of those things where, had he just taken a little bit of time to research the story, he doesn't have to go all in like somebody who's covering news, but you have to have some basic understanding of what you're talking about in order to comment on it effectively.
I agree. I could agree with that to a point. Fun fact, by the way, viewers or listeners, I've been trying to get Pat the NES Punk to come on this show for a while. So, Pat, ball's in your court. I'm just saying. But either way, I'm just putting it out there. I'm kind of poking at him a little bit. I apologize, Pat. I'm sorry. But one other thing I also want to dive into, which I think we touched on a little bit lightly, but I want to kind of dive into it fully, is the idea of like tackling subjects that you know are going to get a rise out of people. When you know you're going to get that backlash, you're going to catch the ire of the internet in some form or fashion. Somebody's catching heat at one point, depending on whatever it is that you're talking about. I know that obviously one of the big discussions right now is women in gaming, or at least, you know, that type of discussion and stuff on all fronts, all over the place. But that's just one example. There's a bunch of different topics. How do you deal with the pressure of like knowing that this type of topic is going to ruffle some feathers in more ways than one, but like you have to do it anyway because obviously you have your obligation to the audience and you have the obligation to your content. I mean, how do you deal with that personally?
Honestly, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. I mean, you have some situations where, you know, I covered the guy who lost a CSGO match today, just uploaded that video today, and his response was that he wanted to start an argument with me on Twitter and block me. You have little situations like that where it's kind of like, it's whatever, okay, you wanted to fight a little bit and you wanted to block me on Twitter, totally fine. Then you have situations, yeah, exactly. And then you have situations like the meme troll situation. I don't know if you were aware of that one.
I know. I saw your videos. I saw a lot of other stuff that went down.
That situation was really interesting because it looked like he started with like false flagging my channel and making comments about me that weren't true, which, you know, hey, if he wants to go that far, that's fine. I had a YouTube network that was protecting me from his false flags at the time. And I did a video basically debunking every single claim he made against me. And that's how I handled that situation. But then I had no idea that he would go as far as to contact my YouTube network to get me cut from the network. I never would have imagined anybody would go that far. So that's one of those things that there's no way I could prepare for that. How do you anticipate that someone is going to go to a business partner of yours and threaten them and do so in a way that it's like, you let this guy go or I'm coming to your offices?
That's a little excessive, like really excessive.
You could never predict that. There's no way that you would ever foresee that sort of thing happening, and yet it happened. So it's like, you kind of have to deal with it with a case-by-case basis. Some situations are a lot easier to deal with. Other ones, not so much. And you might have to get some lawyers involved. I never thought I would get a lawyer involved for a YouTube-related topic, but that's something I had to do with this meme troll thing, which was interesting, to say the least.
I can imagine. I mean, as an offshoot of that, did you ever have something, maybe not along those lines, because that to me, that's insane. That's a little overboard in more ways than one. But did you ever have to have something similar to that, or at least take it to another level, based off a news story that, again, maybe you're far distance from, but you're just reporting on it, and all of a sudden you're catching heat from whatever that direction's coming from?
No, I mean, the worst thing I've ever dealt with prior to that was just people kind of sending their fans on the attack, people downloading videos, people false flagging videos, stuff like that. And honestly, that stuff, it's a pain, but there are ways to deal with it. So as long as you know what you're doing, you can navigate around that stuff pretty easily. This is easily the biggest situation I've ever run into, having myself distanced from a business partner because someone made a threat to them. That's pretty
that is nuts. Yeah, interesting, nuts, ridiculous. There are people wilding out here on these streets, is all I'm saying. Y'all need to just relax. Seriously. But
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, here's a good way to wrap this up. I think this is a perfect way to wrap this up. What is the best aspect about covering trending topics, making the type of videos that you do right now, outside of obviously the satisfaction of knowing that there are people watching them and watching the videos and following you, using you as a source, using you as someone that they go to for information like that? What is the best thing for you personally when it comes to doing this type of stuff, being a part of this craft?
One of the things I really like doing, and this is something that I never foresaw as something that I would be into, but when I went to do this recent shift to trending and gaming community topics and covering that sort of thing, is really taking the time to dig in and get all the facts and all the details. Just something about digging through all the information before reporting on the story. That's really something that I'm really enjoying about covering this kind of content. It sounds like a whole lot of work, and for people who do YouTube videos, typically they just want to get enough information to cover the story. True. But I'm having a blast actually digging in and finding all the details and kind of doing, I guess, what you would call investigative reporting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm having so much fun with doing that stuff. And, you know, because I'm a little bit OCD, sometimes I'm not always the first guy to the story, but at least I can pride myself in having all my ducks in order and having all the facts before I move forward on reporting on something. It's something that's really rewarding. And it's nice to see that the audience sees the level of care and attention that I take to creating my content. And they've been letting me know they think I'm doing a great job.
Now, I know a lot of other bigger channels that do similar stuff to this. They usually have other people go out and search for information on top of them searching for stuff. Do you think it's better to have more people alongside you actually doing that type of investigative reporting, or just to do it yourself where it's you actually being meticulous about everything?
I can say that I'm having a lot of fun digging in myself, but if I were to kind of pretend like that's the only way I do it, that's definitely not the case. I have some really dedicated members of my audience who, if they ever find an interesting story, they'll tag me on Twitter, hey, you should really look into this, Tipster. Or if they'll shoot me a DM on Twitter or an email with whatever they find that's particularly interesting. So there's definitely been times when I've reported on something or I've covered something that was a tip from a fan. But for the most part, I really enjoy digging into stuff myself and looking into it myself and hearing whatever the latest story is and kind of finding all the facts on my own.
I feel like the answer that you were looking for is like, listen, if I can have ninjas do some of the work with me, I'll totally have ninjas. Because yeah, the only person I know of in the industry that's actually probably got like real ninjas employed by him is probably Jason Schreier over at Kotaku. Because God only knows the type of exclusives he gets. He's probably got ninjas stationed everywhere at like all these studios. But joking aside and goofing aside, I think that'll be a good way to kind of wrap everything up right here. We're going to talk a little bit more on EX mode. We're going to go dive a little bit more into some stuff with Tipster. Tipster, is any other like final thing you want to tell the viewers out there, people that listen to this, some of your fans? I'm just having a blast making the content. I'm really enjoying what I do. I'm glad that the audience likes it. And for those of you guys who haven't seen my stuff, be sure to check me out on Tipster on YouTube and Tipster Gaming over on Twitch if you like gaming streams. Nice, nice. There'll be links in the description box below for you guys to go directly to it. Again, if you want to see all of Tipster's content, again, you could just go directly to the links down in the description box below. But again, we're going to talk a little bit more on EX mode. Make sure you guys leave me a like on this video, comment down below with some of your favorite comments or thoughts or anything that we discussed on this episode of Definitive Discussion Rebooted. Again, if you guys want to check out the EX mode we're about to do, you guys got to support me on Patreon. For the $1 level or higher, you guys are going to get a bunch of exclusive content, including this bonus bonus EX mode. I can't believe I got tongue twisted there. That bonus EX mode that we're going to do right now. We're going to talk about a little bit more about reporting on stuff and a whole bunch of other things that I think you guys are going to enjoy. But with that being said, we will talk to all of you again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.